Good evening, all, and thank you so much for coming to this session, which I hope will be able to make an interesting and lively session, not least during the question and answer period, where I'm sure you'll have a lot of questions to ask the panelists. For me, it's a particular privilege to be here because, in a way, I'm here under false pretenses because I'm not a diplomatic spouse. I was a diplomat myself but I think I have interacted with almost all the writers in the book in one way or the other, and that's given me a clear understanding of what are the problems faced by diplomatic spouses, whether female or male, and to what extent are you able to surmount these obstacles, if you like. So let me begin by asking the youngest member of our panel, Aditi, uh, to reflect on what it was like being the daughter of a diplomat.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming again, and thank you all for also inviting me here. Again, I'm not a spouse. I'm a quarter better half of of a diplomatic family, and it's I speak from a great position of privilege as being the daughter, where I didn't have to do a lot of the work, but I benefited and gained from a lot of experiences. But it has been a very interesting life journey to spend a lot of my growing up years abroad. So I started grade one in New York and proceeded to end my high school years in Beijing, um, traveling literally across the continents, and then made it back to India for my undergraduate and graduate education. And in the span of that, I have learned about India in so many different ways. I didn't live in India, but I learned what it meant for a diplomat to be doing the work of speaking well of India, advocating for the country's needs, to then come back and learn from sociology, from the social sciences, what it means to live in India. And I think that has been a very key, pivotal way for me to both see myself and my own identity and also see the work I do. Um, and in doing that, one of the things I think that we have always thought of as a diplomatic family is to acknowledge how much privilege we have in terms of learning about different cultures with so many ways to fail in some of those cultural faux pas, but also learn from them. And I think that has been a really compelling part of the journey for me. And maybe I'll pause here and come back.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, how difficult was it moving from place to place? And did you get the feeling of constantly being unsettled, or were you able to really adapt easily to the changes of schools, for example, which must have been very, very frequent?
Absolutely. So, in diplomatic lives, every 3 years, you're living in a different country with a different posting and completely different environments. And the educational systems also vary quite a bit.
Yeah.
And so, I started school in a public school in New York because I was an English speaking country. So, I was able to access public schooling there, which was rowdy, it was chaotic, it was very American in the 90s. Um, and then slowly graduated and moved into very elite international baccalaureate schools where the education was very loving, very empathetic.
And which were these postings, the further ones?
Yeah, so I this was first in New York,
Yeah.
and then we went on to Poland, and then I spent three very, very formative teenage years in Delhi, in Delhi public school, which was again an exceptionally, that was the culture shock I had in my life, is having to move back to Delhi and learn what it means to navigate this identity of not fully being Indian, not fully understanding the cultural idioms of how people talk about each other in this country. Um, and learning how difficult it is to actually operate and live in India because there's so many forms of stratification, so many ways in which everyone's always hustling with each other to gain from each other, which was not the experience I had anywhere else. To then moving back and giving my kind of board exams at that time, which was a very specific form of education, to then having to take my final years of high school in Beijing with the International Baccalaureate, which was a very different form of education also. So it felt very unsettling very often. I have very strong nostalgic feelings of seeing packed up boxes and thinking that my life is going to shrink and move. But it's also made me absolutely adaptable. And so you can put me in any kind of scenario now, and I'll be able to suss and find my way to understand what's the power structure in the room, who are the main actors, how can I get by without having to create too much of a ruckus. And so I think that's a superpower that I have, because now I operate as a sociologist. I do research in very different people's lives, and I think those formative years of learning how to suss out the room has been very important in my
And
lifetime.
where did you do your graduation and your post graduation?
So I interestingly came back to Delhi
Uh-huh.
to do that. Not a lot of different diplomatic families end up coming back to India, especially the kids, because we are attuned to live a different kind of life. But I always had this open question in me, and my parents also encouraged us to learn what India was for ourselves. And so I came back to Lady Shri Ram College and Delhi School of Economics to
Okay.
learn, to do my kind of humanities training
So both the undergraduate and the postgraduate you did in Delhi.
in Delhi. In Delhi.
Okay. Well,
And learned what Delhi life meant.
well, that's very very interesting to see that you came back to India for your education finally, because it meant that you felt that this is where your roots were in a way.
It meant I actually didn't know what my roots were. I
Yeah.
think the one other thing with diplomatic families is that you don't end up having strong family connections because you end up moving so often. You're not nestled in your joint family networks as other people are. I had to learn what it meant to be part of a larger family when we came back. So yes, I definitely wanted to understand what the country was, and we have excellent education nonetheless. So I
Yeah.
was very happy to come back
Was it
and know some
difficult
roots.
to master subjects like Hindi and so on, which you were obviously not taught in Beijing?
So my mother has since class 1 to class 12 bought every Indian textbook and made me read them over the weekends, taught me those textbooks no matter where we were in the world, because she always knew that I would have to come back and navigate this. And so there was a lot of extra work on her part to make sure that we wouldn't feel the culture shock of having to come back into this educational system. So I always did remedial Hindi classes, but I managed to figure it out.
Okay.
And it was good. Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful to hear your experiences. Now, Anu, turning to you, can I ask, apart from Tajikistan, which you've written about in the book, what were the other postings where you accompanied Muthu?
Um, well, except the Tajikistan was the only country I couldn't or I
Not really,
couldn't
because you were
go
only
because
there
it
for
was a
18
non-family
days, right?
station. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a non-family station.
Mm.
But he's like we've been to we started a career in Germany and then went on to Zaire, which is an extremely exciting country. And then we did Czechoslovakia, Belarus, Azerbaijan, and Lithuania.
Okay.
The countries that
And
I
Lithuania was the last?
Azerbaijan was the last.
Azerbaijan. Okay. Well, that's a very exotic combination, if I may say so.
Yeah.
And
Well, I don't think that was my choice.
yeah,
I
yeah,
had to make. But
yeah.
I enjoyed it, of course. I enjoyed
Yes.
every bit. It was nice to go to countries that you didn't think you would ever go to.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you experienced as a diplomatic spouse in terms of what were the challenges? How did you manage, and so on?
I don't know. Well, when I look back at it now, there must have been challenges at that time. But I don't think I ever found any challenges because just jumped into the deep end of the ocean of the thing and decided I had to swim, and I just made the best of it.
So sink or swim.
I did swim. I learned the language as fast as possible, understood the people, made friends, and it's very difficult to say what was the challenge.
Yeah.
It's right now I cannot pinpoint any.
Any, not a particular challenge. How did you manage in terms of entertainment and so on? Did you have someone go with you, one of the India based
Well, we
staff?
never had anybody come along with us. We always had local help. Fortunately, most of the places that we were in, we got lots of local professional local help, and they really made my life easy.
Hmm.
Because as long as I drew pictures of all the Indian food and I put it up on the wall in the kitchen, and they knew what to bring when, everything went smoothly.
Okay.
I couldn't say I was the best cook, but I knew nobody went hungry from my table, and the food was kind of catered to the palate of the people of the country that we were posted in.
Yeah, well, as a single ambassador, I had to do that as well. So I fully understand what you're saying because I remember, I cook normally without chilies because people find it difficult to handle spice.
Yeah, that's right.
And I had sort of my set menus, including a cucumber raita, a starter for a sit down dinner.
That's right.
And the great favorite was, of course, mutton biryani,
Yeah.
which again was cooked without chilies.
Chilies. That's
And I remember being quite amused because the chief of protocol in Thailand, when I was there, took 3 helpings of biryani, and obviously it was very much to his taste. And then, you had to think about a starter that would work for both vegetarians and non vegetarian. And then finally, of course, a dessert. And sometimes I would add a soup as well. So, I know the travails of trying to put together a sit down dinner menu, you know. So it would be a 4 course menu,
That's right,
basically,
yeah. Well, we used a lot of our imagination because I remember having gone to another diplomat's house and being served a cold starter, a cold
Yeah.
soup.
Yeah.
And you felt, oh, that's a really nice idea. Why can't we have a cold soup? It's
Yeah.
summer. But then we don't have cold soup in India. And then both of us put our heads together and decided to serve a simple dahi bada,
Yeah.
which was just cold yogurt with
Yeah.
tiny little vada in it. So you really had to rack your brain and use your imagination.
Absolutely. I can understand. I can sympathize with that. And I used to make a soup which was a very thin curry with tiny, tiny pakoras in it, but that was served hot, of course, But it was always a big hit.
It would have.
Yeah.
I could imagine. That.
Because it's a very unique taste, with the basin and the dahi and so on,
That's
But those were my problems, not your problems. But
No, but maybe I can just add to
yeah,
that is,
yeah,
I mean, when you have a diplomatic life, part of your role is to kind of convene through your culture, right? Which food and entertainment, your art forms become very important ways in which you can communicate certain messages. And one of the things I thought was really surprising, which I find surprising now, was that at every mission across the world, you celebrate key national days. So Republic Day, Independence Day are important occasions where you can bring lots of the Indian community together, the diplomatic corps, several important people in the government. And when my father was posted as the Indian ambassador to Poland, this was in the late 90s. And our government didn't have a lot of money at that time to to arrange for caterers and restaurants to do this work. It might be quite surprising to the audience. And so me, my sister, my mother, our cook, and my father sat for a week before Republic Day celebrations and made kebabs, made samosas, cut sandwiches. And I think the impression of diplomatic life is to have the star-studded life where you know the names of the single malts and you're able to tell how different wines go together. But essentially, a lot of that cultural work does come down to the labor of families and the labor of the people who have to do that work of being a cultural emissary. And I thought it was very funny to bring the story up because it is everyone's hands and labors that does this work.
Yeah. Well, I've always thought it's a great shame that diplomatic spouses were never acknowledged for the enormous amount of catering they did. The number of samosas, gulab jamuns, kebabs, and so on, which were made, were unbelievable, and they did it on a shoestring budget. As you said, I joined in 1975, so you can imagine how bad the allowances were at that time. Now I must say they're paying a decent foreign allowance and so on, and it was really unpaid labor, which has never been acknowledged, which has never really, people have never come forward to say diplomatic spouses have done this enormous catering jobs, for 300, for 500 people, and so on and so forth, on a very, very small budget, which meant no caterers, which meant doing everything at home yourself. And I think that's a commendable thing, which the ministry ought to have recognized. Now, of course, they give a very good entertainment allowance, so you are able to a certain extent to get it, the whole thing catered, depending on the country where you're posted, of course, and get proper waiters and so on and so forth, rather than calling on the local employees of the embassy to double up as servers. But I've always thought it's a great pity that this hasn't been properly acknowledged. When we talk about the contribution of the spouses, most people are very dismissive, you know. But I think you also wanted Aditi to share a few passages from the book which you were interested in reading out.
Uh, sure, maybe Anu Auntie can also tell us about her chapter if she'd like to read
No,
from it.
please go ahead and choose.
Yeah.
I'm not, well, frankly, okay, for me, I don't write at all. And I wrote this article only to please the editor, and I was quite sure that she'd trash it the minute she got it. And instead of trashing it, she kept bugging me and kept telling me, okay, now why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? And that's how it happened. So I don't think I want to read anything out of my chapter, and I'd rather let you all read it and say,
Just
okay,
hold
let's
your
say
mic
good night
closer.
and go to sleep now.
No, but I think that was a really important point you were bringing up. I can also read the passage, but the unpaid work of actually of teaching the rest of the world what Indian culture is a lot of work and labor that goes into it. I'm sure both of you. Sure, sure. They're a bit more serious, so I'm
Yeah.
going to
Yeah,
to
but
warn
please,
everyone.
please don't think food is the only thing we think about. We think a lot about lots of other things.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I think the important thing is what contribution can you make, because entertainment is only a means to an end, and the idea is that then you gather this group of people together in your home, uh, extend this hospitality to them, and it's amazing how much they relax. They're very flattered to be invited to the houses,
That's right. Yeah.
and the ambassador's home particularly, and they kind of spill the beans on a lot of things which perhaps they wouldn't otherwise do. So I think
Yeah,
that's an important point.
absolutely. Putting people at ease is a core cultural competency, I think, for diplomats that I've learned. But I think one of the passages, so I have not written in this book, but I've had the pleasure of being able to read it. And um, there were some sections in this that I thought really spoke to me, and I wanted to share that with everyone. And please do pick up the book. But this is a small passage from the author called Kusum Tayal, who's writing about being posted to South Africa just as Nelson Mandela had kind of come in. And then through the posting, the Truth and Reconciliation Committees were being formed. to figure out what to do at the end of apartheid. And so let me just read. To bring closure to those who had suffered brutalities at the hands of the oppressive white regime in South Africa, which enforced apartheid for decades, President Mandela established the Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. The goal of TRC was to heal the wounds of injustice by having the aggressors appear before the commission to narrate and repent their actions in the presence of their victims. The court like commission, chaired by Nobel laureate, emphasized encouraging both perpetrators and victims to reveal the truth, while the understanding that there would be no persecution for the atrocities committed during that period. This unique approach was radically different from the other commissions held worldwide. The focus was on reconciliation rather than retribution. An embassy colleague's wife, who was more adventurous than me, called one day and asked if I would like to accompany her for one of the hearings of the TRC. My husband was very skeptical, unsure if it was appropriate for an Indian envoy's wife to attend such hearings. But curiosity got the better of me, and I, along with my friend, went on a Monday morning to the Commission's courthouse. Winnie Mandela was attending that session, during which a white South African policeman recalled in detail how he had brutalized defenseless black people several years ago. Winnie Mandela sat quietly, expressionless behind big dark glasses. One could not guess what she was thinking at that moment. I also wondered what were the thoughts running through President Mandela's mind when he read the headlines in South African press every day, reporting these traumatic recollections of his countrymen. On the third day of the hearing was a particularly daunting and haunting day when the brutality against a 15-year-old child was narrated by an Afrikaner, a South African of Dutch ancestry. I came out of the room with tears flowing down my cheeks, unable to comprehend how cruel someone could be to a fellow human being. She goes on to say that they were then posted next to the United States and they thought that they would have a very different life and encounter a very different set of circumstances when they went to the US. Um, when we were finally posted to the country I was initially so excited about, the United States, I would personally witness its ugly form. In Houston, Texas, our 11-year-old son was traumatized as he was repeatedly taunted as Paki by an American child in school. I was shocked and could not imagine this happening to my own son, not a few months after sitting through the TRCs hearing about the brutality of children. I had thought we diplomats were a privileged lot. Yet here was my 11-year-old son being racially bullied. And I think this is a really, I thought this really spoke to me also as a child who was in this environment. This constant play of privilege and what is privilege when you're both in a very particular position in a society, which other people might not know of. The government might think you're in a privileged position, but the rest of society still treats you as you are. And I thought this was a really lovely example to show just how many different layers you have to keep unpacking as you move across the world, constantly re-identifying yourself, resituating yourself, and having to come to terms with different ways in which people see you.
That's very interesting. I think, I had the privilege of being the consul general in Durban when Kusum and Skantayal were in
Okay.
Johannesburg. And we often compared notes on this. And I attended a few sessions of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in KwaZulu Natal in Durban, and Desmond Tutu was actually the Nobel laureate who was chairing those sessions, and I must say it was quite amazing, to see that spirit of forgiveness, of redemption, and I saw people crying, and when they were talking about how their children had been tortured or even killed in some cases, and at the end they were able to get up and embrace each other as brothers or sisters, and that was for me a truly revolutionary thing. And in fact, I would say I've often said this to many people that my most favorite posting was perhaps South Africa, because although I spent 9 years in Portugal in different capacities as a trainee, as a counselor, as an ambassador, South Africa was transformative in so many ways, and uh, not just the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the enlightened leadership of Mandela, who really forged a rainbow nation, to quote the term used by Kusum Dayal. And it was unbelievable what he did, because he made sure that Parliament stayed in Cape Town, that the capital stayed in Pretoria, the High Court stayed in Bloemfontein in the Orange Free State, and so he gave a great sense of continuity. He said Johannesburg will be the beating heart of the nation, will be the largest city, it'll be the commercial and cultural capital, but I will not change the systems. And that gave people a lot of reassurance, the others. And I mean, he did amazing things. He was, when he was in after he was sworn in as president, he asked the foreign secretary who had submitted his resignation. He was a white South Afrikaner called Rusty Evans. And he told Rusty Evans that, we will need a lot of guidance. And so, if you can, would you stay on and help me to build a proper foreign service, a more representative foreign service? And Rusty Evans was totally, and I think a lot of you would have seen the film Invictus, which is, about Mandela's long years of imprisonment on Robben Island, and how he came out of it unscathed in a certain way, maybe even purified in a certain way, because he was able to absorb all that, and he became, from being a man of violence, he became a man of non-violence and trying to bring people together. So for me, that was an unforgettable experience, including the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But I mustn't hog the conversation. So let me turn to you now, Anu. And I know you said you didn't face many challenges that you can
That's
think
how I
of.
feel now.
Yeah, that's how you feel now. But I'm sure there were times. Were there times when there was a threat of violence, when there was a threat of some kind of riots or anything like that that happened during your tenures in these different countries?
No, not in the countries that I was present in. No, nothing. I mean, of course, we saw history happen in front of us when we were in the then Czechoslovakia and the Berlin Wall came down.
Yeah.
And you had hordes and you had hordes and hordes of East Germans, as they were called then, coming to Czechoslovakia. And the embassy was situated in a place such that you had to pass the Indian embassy before you could go to the German embassy, the West German embassy. And there were these people who would just abandon their where they were, just abandon the cars and walk to the embassy. And after that, soon after that, we saw the so called Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia, where the people overthrew the then communist government. But believe you me, they had this huge place which they call the Wenceslas Square. It's a boulevard,
Yeah.
and it was packed with people, but not a blade of grass was trampled on. It wasn't even the least bit of a skirmish or even people talking loud. It was so quiet, so peaceful, and maybe that's why it was called the Velvet Revolution. So we never really felt or saw any threat to us personally, other than being cautious about how you went about, how you moved around in Zaire, where nobody would hesitate to pull your chain off if they felt. With chain snatchers abound. I mean, they were like a dime a dozen. And in fact, I remember as a person married to a South Indian, had to wear a tali. And the local Indians who were there said, well, I mean, we understand why you have to wear the tali, but, and even though nobody will be able to snatch it because it's thick and strong, but they will definitely try to do so. So please take off the tali. And I did take it off, and I still don't wear it because for me, that was the only kind of threat that you felt over there.
Hmm.
But otherwise, no, never any
Uh,
kind of
you know,
personal threat.
right, because again, going back to South Africa, there was such frequent instances of carjacking and so on over there. So compared to that, yes, it was relatively relatively safe, I
Very
would say.
far safer. And what's nice about the Zairua, as they are called then, I mean, now it's known as the Belgian Congo,
Yeah,
but they actually will never harm you. They will walk
personally,
into your house
yeah,
and they will ask you for your keys, and they'll herd everybody into the room.
yeah,
And then they will empty your house of even the last scrap of paper. But they will never harm you. Even if a child comes out and says, that's mine, they don't even pick it up. They give it back to the child. Moving on.
yeah, and that's a great contrast to other posts I've seen, like Nairobi, where Ambassador T.P. Srinivasan was beaten
Oh, that's
mercilessly.
right.
And he had a broken arm, broken leg, I don't know how many stitches on his
That's
head.
true.
And if it hadn't been for his son, who was able to hide and call out for help, call up for help, it would have continued. And of course, there are a lot of theories about how that happened and why it happened. But, I mean, I've been in riot situations myself with, when there were the red shirts and the yellow shirts and everybody in Thailand. And we had to actually, when we were invaded at the Phuket uh, summit, or Pattaya summit, I think it was. I had to physically get our minister, because luckily Prime Minister Manmohan Singh was not able to attend at that time because he was recovering from heart surgery. So he requested Kamal Nath to represent him. And Minister Kamal Nath was then the commerce minister who had done the FTAs and so on. And it was terrible, And I remember Abhijit Vejajiva, who was then the prime minister, feeling terribly ashamed, because of the fiasco that had occurred. And he said, no, no, we'll all have lunch, and then we'll arrange to evacuate you. But in the meantime, they invaded the place, And Kamal Nath was very funny because he said, I want to see, I want to see. I said, no, you cannot see. You have to go up and be locked in your suite, because what if you fall and you break your arm or something? There are thousands of them coming into the hotel. So, with my sheer force, the first time I've ever laid violent hands on on a minister, I had to literally push him into the lift and take him up to his suite and lock him up. And and then we were eventually able to evacuate him by helicopter. And then they flew them to the airport, and then he was able to take his flight back. But it was quite an experience, I can tell you. It was not easy. And similarly, when we had 15,000 Indians marooned in Thailand because they'd shut all the airports, uh, getting them organized to fly out. And I was very happy to see that Air India and Jet Airways were the first to respond and actually helped us get all of them safely back home. So, there are these situations which we have to face at times.
Well, I never had to face them, but I know that when Muthu was in Tajikistan, he probably did face a lot of it because it was a civil war. That's the country I wrote about, even though I was
Yeah.
there for very short time. But there was a civil war there, and I know of one incident where he talks about another colleague of his calling him and telling him, I don't know what to do. There are bullets flying everywhere. And he said, well, just lie low and don't even go out of the window. So,
Yeah,
I mean, I
well,
guess as
there've been several
that's
evacuations
right.
like
Yeah.
that because I remember in Libya, uh, we had a terrible time because there was, in Libya, we had to evacuate 16,000 Indians who had been just abandoned, ruthlessly by their company. And they were just stuck in these sort of labor camps kind of thing. And where they didn't even have much food or water or anything, because everything had to be brought in from the outside because these were all in fairly remote locations. And we had to basically arrange for, I think it was 6 passenger ships, like cruise ships or ferries. We had to arrange for uh, at least, I would say, about 20 Air India flights. And each time, we had to send them with $1 million because that's what it costs to refuel
The
a
aircraft.
plane and, you know, take off back to India. And then we sent some people across the border to Tunis and some people across the border to Cairo, to Egypt. And our ambassador there actually went to Alexandria because they were brought by ship to Alexandria, brought them back to Cairo, and then organized Egypt Air flights. This was Ambassador Swaminathan, and arranged that to go back. And so we've had evacuations under fairly dramatic. Of course, the most well known is the Gulf War. When there was the Iraq Kuwait war, and we had to evacuate 700,000 people. I think it still remains on record as the largest civilian evacuation in the world, ever carried out in the world. So, um, that these are the kind of situations you face at times. There are riots, there's violence, there's all sorts of things happening, and you just have to face it, with as much composure as you can under the circumstances. And yet you have a certain responsibility. You can't let your officers be harmed or injured in the course of these evacuation uh, uh, arrangements.
Even handling their families must have been quite a challenge.
It was. And, in Thailand, for example, we had people who were kidnapped for ransom. We had, many innocent tourists getting mugged and drugged and robbed. And the ransom case was a particularly difficult one. And, because there were these underworld elements. And unfortunately, the police was hand in glove with some of them. So we had to somehow find a modus operandi, and same with the Somalian pirates in in where was it Somalia, and who were kidnapping Indian crews again for ransom. Then it meant negotiating with the companies, the shipping companies, to say you have to pay the ransom. We can't pay the ransom, and then making sure they were extracted safely and brought back to India.
So
It,
you talked about the challenge that I faced, and what you said right now brings back a very old memory of, and in a very unlikely place. This
Yeah.
was in Germany, where there was an Indian family who had decided to go on a world tour, and they were at Frankfurt railway station, and they found that everything they had, you wouldn't believe that this happened in Germany, a well developed, secure country. And this gentleman's briefcase was stolen. And his briefcase had everything in it. The
Tickets,
family's
passports.
passports, ticket, money, everything.
Mm.
And of course, well, they were then directed to the consulate. In Frankfurt, we have a consulate. And in the evening, we had been invited to a friend's place for dinner. And Muthu opens the door and tells me, well, we have this family who's going to come and stay with us. Now, that really came as a shocker. I didn't know who they were. And they were going to stay there while we went out for dinner. And, all these wild stories about confidence tricksters. And you kind of think, oh my God, I mean, like, what about my whatever? The two little bits of jewelry I had. What am I going to do? Suppose they take it away. What are they? How can I leave my house to strangers like that? So, yes, we did face a few challenges like that, but it was scary. This gentleman's briefcase was stolen by a group of Italians. And that was quite a scary experience because they sent one of their henchmen to our house to meet this Indian businessman and to negotiate with him for the return of his briefcase. And well, it's a kind of longish story, but sometimes having to entertain people in your home, people you've never met before, was at times a
Yeah,
challenge.
and unfortunately, a lot of people feel that they can invite themselves and stay indefinitely in your house, which is very
No, no,
difficult to get around.
they didn't invite themselves.
No,
They were
these were
invited.
people
I
in
mean,
distress,
well,
and
of course, after the second day when I found out why they were at home, not second day, the same evening, I felt very bad. And they were very nice guests, and they stayed with us for quite a few days before they could get their papers back in order.
wonderful.
That's right.
I'm sure you also face this, Aditi, in some cases. Did you have people in distress in any of the countries where you were?
Yeah, thankfully, no henchmen in my life. But so I think by the time I was born in 1988, we were in a very globalized world when I learned what the diplomatic life meant. And my father had been posted to Bhutan, where I was born, and then New York, Poland, China, India, and finally the UK. So we happened during my part of his diplomatic life, we were in fairly developed kind of countries where I think a lot of this didn't come to us as much. But prior to that, before I had been born, my one of the postings my family had was to Tanzania, to Dar es Salaam, and this was in the late 70s, early 80s, where um, like I guess with the Tajikistan story, I mean, the country was just really finding itself and finding its roots, and there was no groceries, there was no ration. A lot of the ways in which my family, my sister who was a newborn, used to get any nutrition was to wait for ships to come in with eggs and salt every day, and as a child, given quinine every day to make sure she wasn't falling sick. And I think some of those experiences have really shaped also how our family deals with some of these things. My father, at some point, was got cerebral meningitis out of a mosquito bite and had to drive himself around to different embassies to find where he could find a vial of antibiotics that could help him. And then eventually went to the Canadian embassy, who kindly lent him a vial of antibiotics that helped save him. He might not have been around unless that officer, his peer in that embassy, had done that. And he always talks about how after that he's always counted every family member of every mission and made sure there was enough medicines and supplies to make sure when any of these eventualities took place, we didn't have to kind of encounter them. So I came into a fairly globalized, well developed world, but that wasn't the case right before I was born. So I think some of those hardships I didn't have to I didn't have to
You
face.
didn't have
I didn't have to
faced.
face. He became ambassador soon after I was born, so I like to. I think I got the good life part of
Yeah.
his career. Yeah.
Anu, any other thoughts on this?
No, 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 no. I don't think so. I mean,
Yeah. Well, if I may, I'll say that apart from the evacuations that we had to do of 15,000 tourists from Thailand and so on,
Right.
it was. We've also done a number of others. We've done the Beirut Sea Lift. We did there was the Beirut Sea Lift. There was, I think, uh, the Libya one, which I mentioned already, the evacuation from Thailand, and so on. And what always struck me was, nobody was particularly inclined to pay us back. The cost of sort of having these flights organized and so on. They just took it for granted that the government of India has an automatic responsibility to repatriate them and to issue the emergency certificates or whatever is required. And going back to Libya again, I saw Mani Mekalai, who was our ambassador there. She was actually, there were bullet holes all over the embassy. And at the same time, she had to organize the 2,000 people at one stage, staying on the lawns of the embassy. And they had to, sort of make sure that the hygienic conditions were
That's right,
maintained,
yeah.
latrines and so on. And also, essentially provide food for them. So they all clubbed together all the supplies they had, including the master, and at least some basic food
Yeah.
could be organized that way with, sort of team leaders being asked to organize the cooking, the cleaning, and so on. And it was quite a quite an amazing situation, I have to say. You know.
I think one of the cases where airlifting someone out of danger did kind of come into our lives was when I was being born. We were posted to Bhutan at that time, and Bhutan was not very developed at that time. And all of the women within Bhutan who had the opportunity to seek better health services flew to Calcutta to do so. And most of the deliveries of, especially the royal family, but several parts of the government were also taking place in Calcutta. And at that time, my mother decided it was a beautiful country. She was in a beautiful estate, and she didn't need to go anywhere else to have me delivered. And she tells the story about how at this hospital, which was a very bare bones hospital, there was no water. Someone had to bring a bucket from one of the Indian embassy homes to help after delivery. When they were kind of listening to my heartbeat within her, there was the large horn that was kind of placed upon her stomach to listen to this. And everyone was quite shocked that she had decided not to leave the country and were quite frightened. What happens if the number two in the Indian embassy's wife goes into distress? What are we going to do? It's going to be a diplomatic issue. Um, but she managed to give birth without requiring that. But there are many of these moments where you kind of have to also decide how much you're willing to take and not take within the family. Of course, this is not from an official position where you're responsible for Indian citizens, but
You are indeed. And as I said, these can be situations that are very fraught because people are in danger. They are scared. They need to be reassured. You need to set up a 24/7, sort of telephone facility where people can phone in and say, my so and so is in such and such a place, and what are you doing about getting him or her out? And that can be quite daunting at times.
But I'm sure you have some very nice memories as well.
I do. And as I said, not just of South Africa, which impressed me so deeply, but I've been very fortunate in my postings because I did 3 postings in Portugal. I was there as a trainee, a counselor, and as an ambassador. I was ambassador to Thailand as well, which was again very fascinating, though we had 4 prime ministers and 6 foreign ministers during my tenure because it was a period of great instability, I would say. And then, but I still managed to get 3 prime ministers to India. during that time. There was Surayud, who was the military one, and then there was Abhijit Vejajiva, and there was another ambassador, another prime minister who came for the BIMSTEC summit. So we did manage to get, and then we had 5 visits from the royal family. The Princess Mahachakri is very, very fond of India, and she traveled extensively, and I accompanied her on all her travels, and everything ranging from the south to Kaziranga to Gujarat to Ahmedabad, and she thoroughly enjoyed everything, and the Kaziranga experience, I think the Assam experience, and to we were able to take her into a old Thai Ahom village. The Thais are originally from the Ahom tribe, and it's a sort of a continuous thing where the north of Thailand, the north of Myanmar, and the north of the northeast on our side are all linked in a way by this tribal identity, if you like. And we took her to this Thai home village, and the Thai home village, they actually found somebody who spoke Thai, and but a very antiquated and old Thai, and somebody sang a song and so on and so forth. And they had to create a special helipad for us to land there, and there were 10,000 people. Because everybody was so fascinated. Because you remember the Northeast was very difficult to travel to. That's right. So it was the first time a VVIP had visited that area. So they flocked in hundreds, and of course, we got the inevitable gumchas and those conical hats and so on and so forth. But it's been a fascinating life. I think I feel very privileged also, as you do, and as you did as well, I'm sure. And we've, I think, covered a fair amount of ground. And I just wanted to say that almost all the authors in the book are known to me personally. Whether it's Mita Purushottam, whether it's Rashmi Ray Dasgupta, or many of the diplomatic wives, and of course Ajay Shankar and Reena Pandey's husband. So they're all, I would say, good friends. And that's why it's been such a delight reading this book, and reacting to it. So, if I can ask you for any final thoughts, and then we can throw it open for questions. Anything in particular you'd like to say?
No, I think it's been very exciting to share some of these stories. I hope they've been interesting to hear. Um, I think the point of the book was also to kind of showcase what life you give up and what life you get when you put yourself into a diplomatic family, either as a spouse or a child. And I think the women who end up becoming part of these families are exceptionally educated, bright women with a lot of social capital, which is very useful in passing through diplomatic life, but has not been acknowledged very much. So, this, I think, is a really lovely addition to put together some of these stories to start visibilizing the other side of this. I think there's always an impression of a lot of privilege and glitzy diplomatic life, but the kind of hard work and unpaid labor and love and compassion and empathy that goes in for sharing our culture and sharing our nation is something that this book has brought out. So I hope that's interesting to everyone.
And Anu, any last thoughts?
Well, the only thing I'd like to say is that most of us who have written in this book have actually been first-time writers. Most of us have never written before. So, if you haven't read the book and you do plan to buy and read the book, I'd like you to look at it as someone tasting a young wine, and it's up to you to decide to enjoy it What to trash it? That's all.
Yeah, this is like
I
the
mean, a
There's
young
there's
wine could
nothing to
turn out to
trash in
be.
this. Let me, as someone who's not written in this, I can say that.
well. I think they used to have a green wine in Vienna, and
That's
this is like green wine.
more like wine, and
Yeah,
I mean, sometimes even young wine matures into something very nice. It savors taste.
that's
Well,
right. Well, with that, I think we'll close the session. It's been an absolute delight talking to all of you and moderating this session. And I hope we've given you some things to think about. I can only say for myself, speaking as a diplomat, that I've enjoyed every single moment of my diplomatic career over 36 years, 38 years if you count the 2 years as Deputy National Security Advisor. And I still cherish very fond memories of the service. And that's why it's been a special pleasure interacting with Aditi and with Anu to talk a little bit about the role of the spouse and daughters in the diplomatic
yes.
service. And all I can say is I hope we get to a stage where there's really 50-50% parity, and we have as many male spouses as we do female spouses, because I think that's the only way we're going to achieve real gender parity and equality. With that, I think I'll bring this session to a close. Please join me in giving them a big hand.
Hi. Thank you very much for that. And my first question is actually, so when we live in India, and especially in a city like Bangalore, imagination. Can you hear me? Okay. I have two questions, and I'll try to get to them both very quickly. But my first question is, when we live in a city like Bangalore, we have a gaze that's very centered on the US and the UK. We don't seem to think of the world around that. And you have this experience in Poland, China, Bhutan, etc., etc., etc. And I know your experience in Eastern Europe. And I just want to say, what does it look? Are we missing something when we focus our gaze only on the US and the UK? What do we miss out when we don't see the world as more diverse? What are the kind of relationships, for example? Eastern Europe, I think, has very many interesting connections or parallels with Indian culture and history in many respects. So I was just wondering if you've ever given some thought to that, and if what your thoughts are on that. And my second question is, you both also have, I mean, I know Aditi is a sociologist and into human settlements and into labor and migration, and I can see a kind of parallel between your life story and what you choose to study. And I know you're a translator, and so I can see also a parallel between that and your and your life as a diplomatic spouse. So I was just curious if you could share a little bit about that as well, how that has shaped your careers.
Well, I don't really think that my experiences shaped what I am doing now, but because maybe there were lots of things that I um, put aside because I couldn't do it while I was while I was accompanying my husband everywhere, and now I have the chance to do it. And missing out, no, I don't think that's right. I mean, why would you miss out just because you're not in X place and not Y place? For me, it's always been a matter of enjoy where you are and make the most of it. I don't think I, as a person, ever felt I missed out on it.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I would answer that by saying I think we live in a multicultural world, a multipolar world, and uh, I personally, yes, I've been posted in Washington, but uh, I've really enjoyed my times in countries like Portugal, like Vienna, Kathmandu, and I can't really say that we don't consider these important. For instance, in Kathmandu, we have one of our largest embassies. Uh, Washington, yes, obviously, but Brazil and Portugal were very small embassies, but even so, we managed to get a fair amount done. So I don't think we really need to worry about uh, focusing exclusively on the UK and the US. I think there is a whole big world out there to discover, and I personally have found my postings in other countries to be fascinating.
Yeah. And I think to the point you asked about, how this life experience translates into work, I think the thing I picked up the most was you have to adapt and learn about difference. And how do you handle difference? Do you handle it with empathy, privilege? Do you handle it with disgust or something else? And I think that thread of being able to, at a young age with my family, immerse myself, constantly learn about culture, observe it, participate it, and when it didn't make sense, retreat back into yourself. That is a like a framework I think I hold with me even in sociology, where you go and study other types of folks who are not like your own. And I now study um, the gig economy in India and service workers and what kind of social protection and rights they need. And these are not people who I share a lot in common with. And so I think I find myself in these places perhaps because of this. Yeah.
Just to add to that, I also find that now that I've retired and moved to Bangalore, I'm able to engage in so many different fields. And that's a great joy for me because these were not things I could do normally while I was in service. I'm on the board of a dance trust theater, Bangalore Little Theater, which is English amateur theater. I've been on a couple of boards, of course, and so on. So I think, yes, in a sense, being open to all these experiences has given me the confidence to do this. I've been in a microfinance company board, I've been on a bank board, I've now at the telecom industry board. And so I personally think we are shaped by our experiences, and I've always had a great love of the arts. So whether it's music or dance or theater and so on, I do a lot of work with NGOs. So yes, it has shaped.
Good evening, ma'am. So my first question is, since you have lived in more countries, what are the lessons that Indians should learn from the other countries, and three lessons what other countries can learn from Bharat? And my second question is, you would have been adjusted to a mindset of a global citizen, but on the major parts of the world, there is a mindset of narrow thinking in terms of racial identities, lingual identities, caste, religion, etc. What would you say to the other side of the fence for coming to this side of broad based thinking from the parochial thinking, what generally major parts of the world follow?
Okay, so the first question was on
What can you learn and
what can we
they
learn, and
and what can
what can we in turn
offer
teach
to
the other side. Um, would one of you like to take that question?
I think I'd like to respond to the last question about being a global citizen. I think it's a tricky line. I think like I said, as not having to do the work of diplomacy but benefiting from it, I definitely had that impression that I was a global citizen, and I was reminded carefully and consistently about the color of my skin and the color of my passport, because that is not truly how the world works. Um, Being a global citizen means you have a lot of privilege and you have the opportunities that a lot of people don't have. A lot of parochialism comes from people who don't have opportunity. So I don't think that's it's not a very simplistic answer to give. Yeah, and I'll hand over to the both of you.
Anu? Yeah, this one. I don't think. I think it has to be a diplomatic give and take, right? That uh, you will share your knowledge and your culture with other countries, and they will share theirs with you. And that's always been my contention, that if you are honest about really wanting to share their culture, you can do it. And similarly, if they want to impart some ideas to you, you should be very receptive. And that's what diplomatic give and take is all about. Anyone else?
So I have a question for Anuanti and to some degree for Aditi as well, being a diplomat's family member. So you've been a diplomat's spouse for you were for many years.
Yeah, you speak up a little.
You were a diplomat's spouse for many years, and you would have had various experiences. Um, at the end of it, how do you be a really good diplomat spouse? What do you think are the key skills that you must have? Really good diplomat.
Oh my
What
God, that's an
What's the-
impossible
what's the
question to
checklist?
answer.
What's the checklist?
I mean, because it's got so many sides to it, and I wouldn't dare answer a question like that because. Oh no! Sorry, we're going into very dangerous waters over here. So I'm sorry. I'll handle it privately at another session.
I mean, I'm just responding on behalf of everyone. But for many decades, this rule has only changed recently. But diplomatic spouses were not allowed to earn and work in the countries where their spouses were posted, right? So it starts really from there. That checklist of what it means to be a good spouse is sometimes given to you, and it's not a choice you always make. And then you, like Anuradha was saying, you kind of go with it and you enjoy and you find the cultural moments. And I think these are the kind of trade-offs that really build all the stories in the book also. So some of that will become evident through all these different life experiences.
If I can also add to that, I wanted to say that uh, when I was in administration in the ministry, I was heading the admin division. I felt that it was very unfair that, while junior wives were allowed to work all over the world, the wife of an ambassador or a consul general was not allowed to work. And so I put up this note to Jaswant Singh, who was then the foreign minister, and all the men, of course, I have to tell you, all the secretaries who were all men at that time, all poo-pooed me, and they said Jaswant Singh will never agree to this because he's one of those who believes that a woman's place is at home and cooking and so on and so forth. And to my delight, it was actually Giri Iyer, the husband of Chokila Iyer, who was our first woman ambassador, woman foreign secretary, who had requested. Giri Iyer actually spoke to me and said, I think this is a ridiculous rule because as the spouse of the foreign secretary, he was the head of ESA, which is the External Affairs Spouses Association. And he says we have to change this. Why should it be that you're not allowed to work as a consul general's wife or an ambassador's wife? And I put up that note, as I said, to Jaswant Singh, and Jaswant Singh said, yes, I agree, and sent it back. So I said, boo to you, to all those stuffy secretaries who said that, oh, no, it's very important, representational obligations, blah, 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 and so on. And so sometimes, the response is very interesting that you get to how diplomatic spouses can be treated.
This is for you because you left us at a very tantalizing point in your story where
Can you speak louder?
I'll tell you.
Just hold it up to your mouth.
you left us at a very tantalizing point in your story in Germany where this family came into your house and then you talked about this Italian guy coming to negotiate the ransom and then you ended the story. That story end.
Did
Like,
the
I'd love to
henchman
know
who
the
did
second half of that
She's
story.
saying you left us at a very tantalizing moment in your story when that family came to stay with you and the henchmen had come to negotiate. So what happened at the end? Did they get their things back?
Oh yes, they did. German police was very efficient. They were involved. Um, they were all asked to intercede, and they didn't get it. I forget. I'm not. I don't really remember 100% because I think I was so scared. I just decided to just be the good wife and give the food and keep everyone entertained. That's a question you'll have to ask Muthu because he probably remembers it clearly because he did they get it back? Everything? No, I don't think so.
They are having a side conversation.
Yeah.
So we're not going to find out today.
Because I know they got something back. They got their passports back, but they didn't get the documents back or something like that.
Yeah, do you remember Muthu?
No.
With Augustine. The Augustines, yeah. You know, when they came and then they. What Kavita wants to know is did they get their papers back or not? Sorry, we're both hard of hearing.
Well, that family, very rich family, they lost lots of money, their fortune, but they got their documents, but the cash was lost for good.
Oh, that's a pity.
That's it. Passports came, we got them the passport, the German police did it, and of course they lived with us for about 10 days, looked after them.
Yeah, but they didn't get back. They got only some of their things and
No,
not
they got,
everything.
they got all the documents of their investment, everything. And their passports were returned, but then by then we had already issued a
New
fresh passport to them because it was reported lost. Once it's reported lost, we don't use that passport again. The new passport is what will be the current passport, as they say.
And there was no problem with their visas also.
Oh, there
Well, at that
were.
time, German Indians did not need a visa
Yeah,
for whole of Europe.
yeah.
And,
What was this time?
Schengen.
Before.
There was no Schengen
There was
then.
no Schengen then.
only after October 1980
Yeah.
did the visa regime started in Europe.
They
largely
had
due to the
problems
asylum
with their
seekers.
US visa.
Yeah.
There was a problem getting that reissued.
Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Yes, I have a question for uh, Sarthi. Yes, your work links digital platforms and AI to like livelihoods in the global south. So, how do you see the current models of platform governance impacting children and spouses of diplomats who must frequently like reinvent their careers in new countries, which have like different digital economies? And one question in general is that, ma'am, you all spoke about the food and serving and catering to all these in all these events and the entertainment. So my question is, how does it affect the political side of diplomacy, and to like what extent does it like affect it? Like, their understanding.
Yeah, I think earlier this year when we had a significant border issue, we did find that there was a lot of social media scrutiny about the Indian Foreign Service and the children of certain really prominent members of the IFS. And I think that was a very telling moment to see how most of us have been able to live our lives fairly anonymously because as family members you're not participating in the actual work, right, of dealing with these very difficult conflicts. um, and so it was very difficult to see how the family had been dragged into that and how the usual politics of Twitter and public media and the scrutiny was kind of placed upon that. That was the very challenging thing to see, very difficult thing to see. I think beyond that, my work around the digital economy is very much about how underprivileged people in our economy use the digital economy. So there's a very different strands and threads. But I think the more pressing thing is how important social media platforms have become in the political game, and then how the family members get dragged into that. It's a very, very difficult thing to witness and see within the IFS.
What was the second question? Did you have a second point?
How does food relate to politics? And
The value of entertainment. If I can answer that, Anu. See, I think the question of entertainment on the whole is a question of uh, encouraging people to learn about your culture, your cuisine, right? And at the same time, catering to local tastes. And what it does is it sort of lubricates the ease of conversations, and it makes people more inclined to uh, to sort of treat you as part of the family, because they, as I said earlier, they're enormously flattered to be invited to an ambassador's residence for a dinner or lunch, as the case might be. And that in itself is one barrier down, right? Because they are happy to be invited. And secondly, they then tend to treat you as one of themselves. And that I found particularly in Portugal, where I spoke Portuguese. And so they would be very open in their dealings with you. So, in that sense, it does affect your political dealings. For instance, when I extradited Abu Salem from Portugal in 2005, I think it was, uh, a lot of it was because of the social contacts I'd built up in through entertaining, through discussions with people. And it was the Interpol chief happened to be a woman. The prosecutor on the Portuguese side was also a woman. So I always joke and say that only 3 women could have done this, got him back, because don't you forget that at that time he was the second most wanted criminal. So we had many lunches, and we were talking about how to do this. So there is a certain value in entertainment that is perhaps not tangibly felt, but indirectly felt. That's my view.
Hi. My question is, every time you would be moving from one country to another,
Yeah,
you can only carry so much of your stuff around with you.
right.
And the second thing is you can't be attached to the country because you're moving to another country. So in a way, you're trained to be detached. So does it help you to grow spiritually?
Sorry,
Does it help you to grow spiritually?
spiritually.
you have to give up the country you're in, so you don't get too attached, and you can't move with a lot of stuff. So does it do more?
Yeah. Any feelings?
Well, you don't really detach yourself. You do become attached to the country that you live in, because after all, it is a minimum of 3 years. But you at the same time, at the back of your mind, you know that you have to leave that place and go to another place or go back home. And when it comes to the luggage that you carry, fortunately, the government of India is very liberal and they give us a good allowance. And we can carry quite a lot of our things from here to the country that we go to. And we can bring things back. So it just depends. I guess it just depends on how greedy you are. So you're too greedy, you can't bring back as much as the government allows. You have to pay for it yourself. Or just bring back what is possible.
I wanted to add to that, Anu, that I've always felt that the allowances were very generous, because you can bring a whole container, you can bring a car if you want to,
That's right.
and so basically the sky is the limit, and most of us would not travel with our with everything you own. You would do a lot of weeding out before you pack. And as far as the spiritual connection is concerned, I would say it's an opportunity to grow spiritually, to grow culturally. And I, for one, loved every country I was posted in, and you don't really get attached in that
Yeah.
sense, but yes, you always have it at the back of your mind that this is for 3 years and I have to move on, or it could be anything from 2 to 4 years, depending on the adjustments that the ministry has to make. But that doesn't prevent you from keeping good friends wherever you go. And I, for one, I'm still in touch with very good friends in Brazil, Washington, South Africa, Vienna, Kathmandu, and Thailand. So, as far as I'm concerned, you don't have to lose touch with anybody. You simply change the context, and you have a lot of nostalgia, you have a lot of friends, uh, and many of them being just acquaintances, you would forget about them. But some of them are truly grateful for the friendship,
And they
and
have
you'll stay in touch with them for the rest of your life. And that gives you a great spiritual awakening, if you like.
If I can just add to that, I think if you spend your whole life growing up in one town, one city, and that's a core part of your identity, I think it's hard to understand some of these experiences because you don't get attached. You learn what's really valuable about people. Even as a child, I learned very quickly who I wanted to become friends with, and I found them and I made those friends. And I think you learn these frameworks of knowing who you are, what your identity is, and knowing that a place is made by the people around you, not just because it's pretty and it has beaches and good food and good wine.
Are there any other questions?
Just one last one, maybe.
Yeah.
So I'm a non-diplomat with different places in the world, so different places. One thing I always felt that the diplomats are living in a bit of a bubble because they cannot say some things. They have to be constantly aware of what they're talking with the locals, but that's not applicable for people like us. Do you see that as something that inhibited from you from making relationships, or that's perfectly fine?
No, I don't think it prevented me from making friendships. And as I said, I'm still in touch with a few good friends, and from each of the countries where I was posted. For instance, I go back to Lisbon, which is probably where I spent the longest because I was there 3 times as a trainee counselor and ambassador, and I lived there for 9 years in all. I go back every year practically for to see my friends and to interact with them. In fact, I celebrated my 70th birthday in Portugal, in Lisbon. And so no, you don't have to lose contacts with anybody because you move so often. I've kept those friendships going. Anu, what would you like to say?
Lived around the world, not as a diplomat, and he gets to be more free about what he says. And he says
Oh,
that
yeah,
diplomats
yeah.
kind of have to censor themselves a lot, and does that prevent making
Yes,
friendships?
to a certain extent, yes, because uh, you can't perhaps, because that's their sense of diplomacy after all. You can't express yourself so freely that you offend the country where you're posted. But I think there's sort of a golden mean where you can get across your view without offending the person.
It's just being able to choose the right expression, the right language. It doesn't really affect your friendship as such or your
No.
relationship. No, it doesn't. It's up to you to decide how you walk around it so you maintain a relationship without offending the other person and without necessarily uh, saying some, I mean, sorry, without compromising on what you personally.
Oh, I mean, I think I mean, I was a child, so there was no real restrictions on me. But there were moments, of course, where you kind of have to, where that identity became kind of clear to me. So when we were posted in Poland, this is when our nuclear tests were happening in India, and I don't know, 10 or something at that time, and I had a little peace necklace on, as one does, as a little choker, as an accessory. And my father came home and said, "Are you sure you should be wearing that? I don't think we're really behaving in line with that. So someone might ask you, someone else might ask you about this." And it brought home the fact that, yes, I wasn't just existing in this nice bubble where I was in a very good school, playing in the snow at the end of the day, but I really was having to speak for something larger. And so that seed grew in my mind.
So, with that being the last question, I think we'll bring this session to a close. Please join me in a hearty round of applause to our two panelists. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being such an attentive and interactive audience.
Thank you so much to Lata also for bringing this together and for bringing the book to BIC.
And I'd like to thank both Lata and Aditi for coming here and making this day possible.
I'd like